This video is going to look at the death of Nero, looking at two sources, a section of Cassius Dio and a section of Suetonius. So essentially these two sources are going to tell us exactly the same story with some slight differences in some of the detail. But it does mean you can compare and contrast the sources and show that its events are shown to be, the same consistently. And obviously you can then cross-reference the source evaluation between the two. So we're going to start with the Cassius Dio source. So this is obviously coming after the Vindex rebellion, it's coming after the rise of Galba, etc. And as a result, I've lost my mouse. Oh, there it is. Sorry. He'd been deserted by all without exception. So he decides to make a couple of plans. As per usual, it's always the same plan, to be honest. Kill everybody and burn the city. The likelihood he knew he couldn't do either of those things, but that does seem to be, take some kind of act of revenge. It seems to be his go-to sort of desires, according to the sources. So Nero's about to do this, and then the Senate removes his bodyguard. So that's quite important, because obviously that means he has no protection. And to make it legal for him to be removed, he's declared a public enemy, and that's when they appoint Galba to be emperor. So this is basically, that's the end of Nero's rule. He's finished. If you're interested in what comes next, essentially with Galba being emperor, there's basically there's a civil war. There's lots of sort of short-term emperors, and then the new family, the Flavians, come in afterwards, but not relevant to us. The important thing here is at this particular point, and to be honest, you can kind of stop the story here if you really want to. Nero has died. Not died, has well, he's died as emperor, he's no longer emperor. So the rest of the source is going to talk about his escape and his eventual death. So he plans his escape, he dresses looking kind of like a poor person, he takes some imperial freedmen, he takes 3 of them, and they leave at night, fine. People start to recognise him, so he starts to get really worried because he's afraid that basically they're going to be sending soldiers after him. Puts everyone's on rising. I'll come back to the earthquake thing in a second. So he's worried that people are being sent after him. So he decides to get off the main road and hides, and he sort of covers himself up with some reeds to wait till morning. So there's this story in both the Galba. Sorry, I'm looking at the word Galba. In both the Cassius Dio source and in Suetonius that there's this massive earthquake. There might well have been an earthquake, but according to Cassius Dio, the earthquake occurs and the souls have been put to death start rising up. That obviously didn't happen. But anyway, it just makes me chuckle. So he waits until daybreak, he's trying to avoid being seen, he's really scared in this section, so he thinks everybody he hears walking past is out to get him. And he's worrying about dogs and birds because, basically he's really jumpy, understandably, really, but he's very, very jumpy, which is what that bit talks about. He also talks about, he starts kind of like lamenting and bemoaning his fate, so he's obviously a bit of a pity party going on at the same time. Don't use that phrase in an essay. And he sort of starts thinking about his time, how he used to have loads of attendants, and now he's just hiding some freedmen. And he can no longer play the part of other matricides and outcasts, so he can't kill off. It's not the good times when you can kill your mother, etc. He's now just by himself. And according to Cassius Dio, he starts to have some regrets. He was sorry for the outrages he had committed. So that's quite a nice quote about his kind of reign, as though he were able to undo the trouble he had caused. So that kind of summarises, I guess, the source's view of his reign, that it was outrageous, which it kind of was, and disgraceful. So he's abandoned. He's got 3 freedmen after him. Not freedmen after him. So he's got 3 freedmen with him. Sorry, it makes more sense. And he's sort of in a moment of self-pity. So it seems that no one's looking for him. I can kind of see where this is probably going to go. So he goes to a cave and he starts to eat some bread and some water, which is just, okay, it's really exciting information. Meanwhile, at the same time that he's hiding in a cave and drinking some bread and water, maybe not drinking the bread, but drinking the water, eating the bread, the Roman people are offering sacrifices and going mad with delight. So everyone is happy that Nero is gone, wearing flat caps as though they've been freed from slavery. So if we think about Galba's coin with the flat cap and the 2 daggers, it was obviously reminiscent of Brutus's coin after the death of Caesar, is that kind of idea that they've been freed from slavery, and they decide to vote Galba to be emperor. Okay, and that's when they start to search for Nero, is at this particular point, and they don't know where he's gone, so they dispatch the men on horseback against him. Okay, He then realises that they're approaching. The story kind of jumps a little bit, and decides to order his companions to kill him. They refuse, so he ends up having to take his own life because the horsemen arrive. He doesn't want to be killed by the soldiers. And that is basically the end of Nero, according to the Cassius Dio source. So then we look at the Suetonius source. Basically, exactly the same story. So, importantly, the armies have revolted, so it's not just people in Rome. He gives a member of his household, I think Locusta, is a freedman from memory, gives him some poison, which they're going to hide in a box, and then he goes to some gardens. He tries to persuade some guard officers to flee with him, but they decide not to. He then decides on a number of plans, as you know, Nero is a planner, so he might throw himself on the mercy of the Parthians of Galba. Because Parthia he has kind of reached an agreement with via Corbello. Galba is obviously going to be the new emperor. Or he might go to the roster, so that's in the forum, and basically just plead to the people and hope that they might make him a prefect of Egypt or something. So basically really unrealistic plans, but no worse than the ones that are mentioned in Cassius Dio. So he sort of waits until the next day, but during the night he finds that the bodyguard deserted him, so same story. Summons his friends, but his friends don't turn up, because why would you, because he's now a public enemy. Nobody answers the door to him, and he finds out that the poison has also been taken with the caretakers. Everyone has abandoned him, he's just on his own. So that's when he decides to leave. He finds some secluded spot where he can hide and collect himself. Okay. They're going to one of his freedmen's houses. Fine. He then hears basically some nearby soldiers, and that Galba was going to kill him. So he gets a bit freaked out by this and basically has to run away, which is what this is going on about. And then basically this is all kind of the same story that Cassius Dio takes. So they're on a road. There's some bushes and some reeds. It's going really hard. They have to hide for a bit. Okay, fine. The only difference is that this time, instead of hiding in a road with some reeds in the Cassius Dio source, this time they're in a house and he has to hide. But basically it's the same thing. He eats some bread and he drinks some water. He obviously realises the game is up and that people are going to come after him. So he orders them to dig a grave so he can be buried afterwards. He also learns then he's been declared an enemy of the state, and he'll be punished in ancient style, in inverted commas, when arrested. So basically that means stripping your victim naked, thrust his head onto a wooden fork, and then flog him to death with rods. So that just sounds horrible. So understandably, Nero doesn't want to die like this, so he needs to take his own life, but he's unable to do so. So he starts moaning about his cowardice, look how ugly my life is, isn't it awful, isn't it awful? Then he hears some horses arrive, so then he realises time is up. So according to this version of the story, he stabs himself in the throat and then was already half dead when the centurion enters. And at that point, he then dies, and that is kind of it, really. That is the death of Nero, and that is, if we scroll down, the last source from the Rome source book.